Good afternoon. No. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is MacRae, and I will be your host and moderator for the next 90 minutes. Today's panel is entitled Electing People with Disabilities. Nova Scotians recently participated in 3 elections at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government. While little official data exists about the participation of persons with disabilities in elected office, anecdotally, evidence suggests engagement in this area of our democracy is very low. But why? Today's panelists will share insights and experiences navigating elected office and barriers to full inclusion within the world of politics, and what could be done to support candidates with disabilities to find their point of entry through volunteering, civic engagement, or seeking election. I hope that you will find today's panel very informative, insightful, and inspiring. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this discussion in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation, which is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship. Mi'kmaq have made this land their home from time immemorial, and they are its past, present, and future caretakers. Despite this, the pursuit of colonialism resulted in stolen lands, encroachment on sacred territory, cultural genocide, and oppression that served to advance the lives of settlers at the expense of the Innu people. As we continue to forge a path towards truth and reconciliation, I hope that we can draw upon the wisdom of the Mi'kmaq to guide us in our important work. Now, a few housekeeping issues. I would like to note that captions are enabled in the webinar and can be turned on using the closed captions button at the bottom of the screen. As well, should you require ASL, you can pin the interpreters to ensure clear access. Throughout the panel, you can submit questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And if time permits, we will draw upon them near the end of our discussion today. Today's panel will be recorded and made available via the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission's YouTube channel within 24 hours. We are hosting this discussion as part of Access Awareness Week, Nova Scotia. 38 years ago, Nova Scotia was the first province in Canada to champion Access Awareness Week as an extension of Rick Hansen's 1987 Man in Motion World Tour. During this initiative, Rick and his team wheeled through 34 countries, raising awareness about the potential of people with disabilities and the possibility of creating accessible and inclusive communities. This year's provincial theme, Our Voices, Our Votes, Disability Rights in Action, reminds us that change is driven by necessity, passion, and perseverance. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and especially our panelists for taking time to share their experiences in elected office. We will hear from our panelists shortly, but I would like to introduce them, beginning with Stephanie Cadieux. Stephanie is a former member of the legislature and cabinet minister in the riding of Surrey-Panorama, British Columbia, and is the Chief Accessibility Officer of the Government of Canada. Next, I would like to introduce Carla Qualtrough, a former member of Parliament, cabinet minister representing the riding of Delta, BC. She has served as both Minister of Sport and Physical Activity and Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion. Of course, she is also an accomplished Paralympian, an advocate, and a lawyer. Excuse me. Gary Maddy is a municipal councillor representing District 8 in Antigonish County, Nova Scotia, and he was first elected in 2016. And last but not least, Kevin Murphy is a former MLA and Speaker of the House in the Nova Scotia Legislature. He was first elected in 2013, serving in the riding of Eastern Shore, Nova Scotia. These bios are very condensed and do not represent the breadth of accomplishments of any of our esteemed panelists, but in the interest of time, we're going to leave it there. I would like to share a bit of background before we invite our panelists to share their experiences. The impetus for this event began many years ago, when my late husband, Steve Esty, a longtime advocate for the implementation and monitoring of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, decided to run in the 2013 provincial election here in Nova Scotia. He thought that maybe he could make a lot more progress on advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities if he was in the inside. While there was so in 2013, he was nominated to be the candidate in Dartmouth North for the NDP. While there was tremendous enthusiasm for him to run, and everyone did all they could to make it accessible as possible for him, as a late deafened individual who also had mobility challenges, it was a daunting exercise. He went door to door with young adults who were very adept at keyboarding on their phones. It was, in those days, the only expedient and cost-effective way to have conversations on doorsteps. But if my memory serves me correctly, there was no real infrastructure for him to access established funds to pay for disability-related accommodations. While he was not successful in this election, he came to understand all the barriers that people with disabilities would face in running or even getting involved with a party. And he knew that if he was to try and run again, there would have to be the infrastructure in place to make it much easier to be provided with the various accommodations he would require to run. Another candidate in this election, as we just said, was Kevin, who ended up being the Speaker of the House, and you will be hearing from him shortly. At that time, I was the Executive Director of the Disabled Persons Commission here in Nova Scotia, and had been for a few years exploring the notion of establishing a campaign school for people with disabilities, modeled after the campaign school that the Nova Scotia Status of Women had been running for several years. But it was difficult to get it off the ground, as it was deemed that people with disabilities could attend schools that were already established. After the 2013 provincial election was over, Kevin, Steve, and I sat down, as we were all very keen to host a forum that would shed some light on this issue and provide us with some action steps to make it easier for people with disabilities to get involved with public and political life. We were still keen to see the establishment of campaign school for people with disabilities. The day was called Forum 29 because the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities speaks to the need to ensure that people with disabilities can get involved in political life. Article 29 is called Participation in Political and Public Life. It says, state parties shall guarantee to persons with disabilities political rights and the opportunity to enjoy them on an equal basis with others. It's a lot longer than that. That's just basically the first sentence. So if you want to learn more about what the article actually says, you can go on the UN website and find it there. Forum 29 was a great success. Over 60 people participated and listened to individuals who had run for elected office at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. We broke into small groups and brainstormed and came up with concrete steps to move this issue forward. One of the tasks was to research various models that were in place in other parts of the world. The other was to take the information from this forum and create an action plan. While there was success in researching various models that existed, and I will let Kevin speak more to this in a minute, the creation of an action plan was never realized, which is why we are here today. We are keen to pick this work up again, and we are keen to hear from the panelists about their experiences and ideas about how we can move this issue forward and reignite the conversation on this important issue. Over to you, Kevin.
Very much, Anne, and thanks for everybody for joining today. And what now is finally a sunny afternoon here in Nova Scotia, and we're happy to take an opportunity during Access Awareness Week where we're all celebrating and reflecting on the accomplishments of people with disabilities, not only in Nova Scotia, but across Canada and hopefully across the globe. So just to build a little bit further on what Anne has laid out in terms of Forum 29, which really was that initial formal conversation about the lack of representation of people with disabilities in elected life. As Anne mentioned, I had the good fortune, I was elected Speaker of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly in 2013, and therefore became a member of the Canadian Presiding Officers Association, which basically is the speakers from all Canadian provinces and territories, including the federal parliament in Ottawa. And I was able to bring this story of Forum 29 and the topic of the lack of proportional representation of persons with disabilities in elected office to my peers. And speakers have many roles in the parliaments of the Commonwealth. One of which, informally, I like to say, is that we are the keepers of democracy. And it's part of our responsibility to ensure that the governments that are duly elected are truly representative of the population of which they're elected to serve. That's a bit of a mouthful, but when you think of all the demographics that make up our population in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, geography, people with disabilities really barely registered on the radar in terms of how many people actually had bums in those elected seats. Informally across Canada, no data exists per se, because as we all know, the onus is on people to self-identify as having a disability. Some of us have obvious disabilities that are very visible. Many others have disabilities that aren't visible and may choose to not identify. But the bottom line is that there is no formal data that we can point to, but informally, we pursued that data, and we basically confirmed what we thought we already knew, that in Canada, significantly less than 1% of the people that are occupying our elected seats at all three levels of government are people who self-identify as having a disability. When you consider that in Canada, using current statistics, 28% of our population self-identifies as having at least one significant disability, we can see the gap in representation. And that leads us to, how do we fix that? Hence the conversation around Forum 29. Hence my ability to bring that to my speaker colleagues in Canada, where they really, caught by surprise was not, I don't think, a proper way to describe it, but they were very enlightened, let's put it that way. And it really didn't take a lot of effort to convince them that this was a good cause for us to take up. And by virtue of Canada being a member of the Commonwealth, we are, the next parliamentary body is the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which is made up of the 50 plus countries in the Commonwealth, all of which subscribe to the new Westminster system of government. We were able to, with the help of my colleagues in Canada, advance this through the proper channels. And over a couple of years of advocacy with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, we were able to get them to adopt the cause and create only the second ever permanent subcommittee, or as they call it, network, in the history of the Commonwealth Association, and that is a Parliamentarians with Disabilities Network. Their purpose in life is modeled after the Women's Parliamentarians Network, which is meant to foster interest in women to seek elected office and therefore to support women after they're in elected office. And the mandate basically is the same of the Parliamentarians with Disabilities Network. It is to support people with disabilities who are in elected office and to create an environment where people with disabilities across the Commonwealth have a better chance of success in being able to participate in elected office. The network was formally established in 2017. We had our first international meeting here in Halifax, and the network meets regularly through its channels of 7 regional champions that mirror the 7 regions of the Commonwealth. And they participate and have agenda time every year at the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association annual general meeting. And I encourage everybody to Google the network to see what they're all about and see if they can support your efforts or somebody you know to seek elected office. So I'll park it there and I'll turn it back to Anne, and happy to take any questions near the end on that.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to actually keep a timer going so that we can keep on task. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give each of the panelists 10 minutes to answer the following questions. And when you're getting close to your 10 minutes, I'll let you know, so that we can, as I said, keep things on task because we'd really like to be able to have, some follow-up questions from people who are listening in. So, the questions that we would like you to answer are as follows. What made you want to run? What was your point of entry? What barriers did you encounter? And how did you overcome these barriers? So we're going to start, and I'm going to call you in some sort of order here. And we'll start with Carla, and then it will be Stephanie, Gary, and then Kevin. But I'll let you know when you're getting close to your 10 minutes. So Carla, would you like to begin?
Thanks, Anne. And Anne, we all miss Steve so much. So, just miss him a
Thank you.
ton. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Carla Qualtrough. So I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Tsawwassen and Musqueam First Nations here in Delta, British Columbia, which was my riding for the past 10 years until about a month ago. So I am a newly retired member of Parliament and former cabinet minister. I think this is such an important conversation, and I'll start by echoing what Kevin said around the importance of representation and the lack thereof right now within all aspects of our political system, whether it's the political parties, the leadership of those parties, the voters within those parties, candidates, and then ultimately an elected office. So much. There's such a void of disability representation that I can't stress how important I think this conversation is. I started my political journey, I guess I would say, this kind of what made you want to run. I initially actually ran for a school board here in Delta in 2014 at the prompting of Stephanie, who you're going to hear from as well. So Steph really encouraged me to kind of dip my toe into politics. I had been asked and didn't know anybody like me. I didn't know any blind people who were elected officials, and quite frankly, only knew 1 or 2 people with disabilities, who, including Steph, Sam Sullivan at the time. And so it was really important to me to have had the support of somebody else with a disability in kind of jumping into this space where there weren't a lot of us. So I ran for school board. I was interested in education policy. I was interested in kind of education for kids with disabilities. Yeah, that was it. I did not succeed in that effort. I didn't really know how to run for office. I didn't have a machine. I didn't have a structure. I didn't really know what the heck I was doing at all, to tell you the truth. But what that did was that actually put me on the radar of the then chair of the school board locally here, who happened to be also the chair of the Federal Liberal Riding Association here in Delta. And she actually took me out for coffee 2 days before the school board election and said, I don't think you're going to win. And I think that's the best thing ever for Delta, because I'd like you to be our candidate in 2015. So literally that's how, Stephanie encouraged me to run for school board. That wasn't successful, put me on the radar. And within months, I was the federal candidate here in Delta. Now, you'll have to appreciate there had not been a Liberal MP in Delta since 1967 at the time. So it was a bit of a hope and a prayer, but we got to work. And I guess my big observation was, as important as it was, it very quickly became apparent that the system wasn't designed for people like me, right? That the whole experience of becoming the candidate, through, becoming a member of a political party, campaigning, door knocking, doing all candidates meetings. None of this was really set up for people who couldn't see very well. So I would go to a campaign college, and none of the materials were available in a format I could read. None of the materials were, people just weren't thinking like that within the Liberal Party. I would go to an all candidates meeting, and they would hand out the questions, and you're sitting in front of 400 people, and the question's in a font you can't read. And so while the other candidates are trying to figure out what their answers are going to be, I'm just trying to get somebody to read me the question. And so it was very kind of eye-opening. And of course, I had practiced human rights law before this. I'd worked for the Canadian Human Rights Commission. I'd worked for the BC Human Rights Tribunal. And so I knew I had a duty to be accommodated. And it was a real eye-opener, the extent to which those accommodations, as you said about Stephen, weren't part for the course, right? And voters weren't used to a candidate who behaved like me, is the best way I could put it. Someone who couldn't read name tags, someone who couldn't recognize faces. Volunteers weren't used to having to read the numbers on the door when you went door knocking, because I didn't know if I was right at the right address. So there was a lot of education that had to happen along the way. And what I learned very quickly was that it would be up to me, and this is kind of getting to your point of, what did you do to help remove those barriers, is I had to be really honest and very open about my disability in a way that I hadn't been, and what my particular needs were, and some possible solutions to kind of get those needs addressed, that they weren't going to come at me. I was going to have to figure this out. Now, I had done all that work. I knew what I needed. I knew what would be the best optimal environment for me. And so I became very kind of more comfortable than I had been in the past of explaining to people what I could and couldn't see, what things I needed to adapt, where I needed kind of help, and educate about that the need for help was completely independent of my ability to do the job, right? I needed a different way of doing things, because if you'd have just done it this way in the beginning, I wouldn't be asking, but because you haven't, I'm going to need this in an alternate format. But really kind of trying to dispel the attitudinal myth, like the barrier there about all the assumptions people make about what you can and cannot do as soon as you learn you have a disability. They learn you have a disability, right? But it really also invigorated me, because I realized how important it was that we do this, right? That Steve did it, that Kevin did it, that we all did it, that Stephanie had done it before me. Because there just wasn't this awareness within the system of the need for disability representation, but the willingness and flexibility to do things a little differently when you have candidates, and I faced a lot of this actually as a candidate as a mom, right? I also went in there with a 2-year-old on my hip to a lot of these things, and faced a lot of similar questions about even the appropriateness of me embarking on this journey at that time in my life, and what was going to happen to my poor children if I got elected, and all this stuff. But it was a really important conversation that we were having in the party, in the riding, in the province, in the country, because someone like me had stepped up to run. Conversations that weren't happening in that party, in that space, in this riding, certainly before this. And so I think that was, so I spent a lot of time on the education piece, and you guys all probably live it who are on this, that there's so much of your time you spend just explaining, just explaining. In my case, what I can and cannot see, that when it's light, I'm almost totally blind, I'm better in the dark, that kind of, relatable differentiation, I guess I would say. But it was really important. And then when I was successfully elected, there was that whole re-education that had to happen again within Parliament, right? They never had someone in Parliament who couldn't see when the speaker stood up. Kevin, you'll see, like, Parliament is super visual, right? It's a very visual experience. You sit down when the speaker stands up, and if you can't see the speaker, somebody has to like grab you on the sleeve and yank you down because but it's that there was I couldn't read the material that was handed out. They'd never had a cabinet minister who couldn't read a table dropped item, and how was I going to participate? So it was a lot of learning, but boy, was it worth it. Like, I can tell you, it was such an exciting journey, and I am super confident that the fact that I was at that table made a difference. It consciously constantly forced people to have conversations around disability inclusion that were not happening before. I have young people now wanting to run because they saw that I did it. I did it because Stephanie had done it. There's this real role you play as a leader and as a trailblazer for some of us, that kind of paves the way for the next generation. I have lots of volunteers that have young people with disabilities. I stacked my team that way on purpose because, first of all, these are brilliant minds, but second of all, representation matters. And so, Kevin and I ended up working together. Steph, Chief Accessibility Officer, like, it just, it's a super exciting time, I think, to be part of it. But I think the takeaway, and I don't know how much time I have, the takeaway
Yeah, you have about a
is,
minute or so.
okay, I would sum it up is that you got to be it feels really brave to kind of not just self-identify, but kind of self-declare. Here I am. Here is what, who I am. And a part of me is I identify as someone with a disability, and that I can't see very well. And so what that means is ... And what I need from you is ... And I'm going to have to tell you 100 times about all of this. And to have the confidence to separate kind of how you can optimally perform the work you're seeking to do from, the skills you bring to do it. Because, just because I ask for help or ask for an accommodation does not mean I can't do this job. It means for me to do it in the same way at par with you, I need to do it a little differently. So, it's the bravery that comes in an overwhelmingly intimidating situation that's brand new, that you just have to kind of own it and just be yourself. And part of who I am is someone with a disability. That's me. What that brings to my candidacy is a lot of richness of experience and perspective. But it also means, Canada, we're going to shake things up about how we do things. And that's a good thing for our country. So thank you, Anne. Can't wait to hear what everybody else has to say.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm going to reset this. So bear with me a minute. I'm not very tech savvy at this stuff. So next up is Stephanie. Go ahead.
All right, Anne, thanks. Wow, how to follow up on Carla. I'm just going to run through the questions the way you've delivered them.
Sure.
Why did I want to run? What made me want to run? I never considered politics. I mean, it wasn't something I woke up when I was 8 and said, I want to be prime minister. But at 18, I had an injury that changed my life, set me on a different trajectory. I ended up working in the nonprofit sector, working with people with disabilities and advocating for them, and seeing what was right with our systems and what was not so right, what worked and what didn't. And it put me in front of people in government at all different levels. They're advocating for change, making policy policy direction, giving them policy direction ideas, things that we needed to see for people like myself to be full and equal participants in society. And as I did that work, I realized that there was a lot of good people in government. There was a lot of good people who had run for office, and they weren't as scary and as far away as I thought they were. They were actually quite approachable, and they did want to hear what I had to say. But they also had a lot of other people who wanted to talk to them and tell them what their issues were and rising to the top of that issue pile was not an easy thing to do. But then I realized, well, maybe I'm kind of too nice. Maybe I'm not that great an advocate. Maybe I'd be better on the inside, much like Steve thought. And so I was sort of starting to think about it a little, and I thought maybe at some point in my life, maybe I would consider politics of some type. I never imagined it would be when it was in 2008. I was 35 years old, and one day the phone rang, and the Premier asked to see me. I had never met the Premier, so this was kind of a shock. But I went in and had a conversation with the man, and he asked me to run for office. He said, we need people like you. We need your skills. Would you consider it? And I went home and thought about it. I went home and talked to my husband and said, really? Like, they're asking me? And I was really fortunate because I had a husband who said, well, of course they're thinking you. And of course you should do this. And you said yes, right? And I said, well, not yet. He said, well, you're going to say yes. And I said, well, it's going to be a big change in our life. And he said, yeah, but you need to do this. You're right for this. So I threw my name into the ring, and I did it with very little knowledge of what that meant. I sort of understood what it would be if I got elected, but I didn't really understand too much about what it meant to get elected. What I learned was there is a whole world of people who really like politics, and they're involved, and they volunteer their time, and they are there, and they form around you, and that support base comes to you, and people step forward to guide you and to mentor you, and you choose your mentors out of those people who step forward. And I had great mentors and great support. And in that very first election that I ran in a riding I did not live in a city I had lived in for only a few years, I won. I was the first or second person declared elected on election night in 2009. It was, I think, as shocking for me as it was for anybody else, and it felt great and scary all at the same time because I really didn't know what I was getting into. And there had been barriers through that campaign process. There had been challenges, but I think I went in so unaware in many respects that I just tackled them one at a time. I use a wheelchair. Door knocking in an area with hilly streets and houses with steps made absolutely no sense whatsoever. But that was how you campaigned. That's how your campaigners and your teams were measuring whether or not you were doing a good job. And I couldn't do it. At least not in a way that made me feel good. I didn't like standing on the side of or sitting on the side of the road while somebody went to the door and pointed at me and talked to somebody about would they like to speak to me. It felt weird.
Yeah.
Right? And it felt disabling. and I
Right.
didn't like it. So I just decided I wasn't going to do it. And I did very little of it, very little door knocking in 4 elections. Because for me, it didn't work. So I had to find another way to get at people. So we did a lot of flyer dropping and inviting people to come and meet me and sort of explaining why I'm doing that instead of coming to them. And people were really responsive to that, I felt. And obviously, it didn't change their mind about voting for me. So thank you very much, Surrey-Panorama, Surrey-Cloverdale, Surrey South, for that. I felt very welcome. But it didn't mean nobody ever asked the question. It doesn't mean nobody ever said to my face or behind my back, how is she going to do the job? She uses a wheelchair. What does she have to offer? She uses a wheelchair. Yeah, I use a wheelchair. It means I'm innovative. It means I am incredibly strong and resilient. And oh, on top of that, yeah, actually, I have a brain too. And you know, I think I took a piece of advice from that that I had heard somewhere before, and that was that if you don't believe in yourself, let somebody else's faith in you be your strength. And I think I did that. I think when people questioned me or those moments came up where they were sort of where the disability was really front and center, I said to myself, the premier wants me to do this. If he thinks I'm good enough, other people will, right? If he thinks I'm good enough, I should believe it. I do
We
have
have about
something
2 minutes
offer.
left.
I do have something to offer. And so, you know, I'm like Carla. It was so worth it. For all the hard days and all the difficult things and going into a legislature that was not accessible and whatever. Well, today it's much more accessible than it was before. We have a public entrance at the legislature in BC that is fully accessible. We have power doors. We have desks we have signaling mechanisms to notify the speaker when members want to speak. We found the solutions because I was there. And colleagues started to think about and ask those questions like, well, is it accessible? And I didn't have to be the one asking anymore. And that's what representation does. That's what being there does. And um, I wouldn't I wouldn't change it despite the challenges. And yes, there are probably many that I can't even off the top of my head think of, like stages that weren't accessible and all that sort of thing. But it was worth it.
Thank you. That was great. Next up, we have Gary. So I'm going to reset this for 10 minutes and you can start.
Good day. I guess the first question why I decided to run, I guess it began for me probably previous to the election. I had went to council, previous council, and I was working with a group with youth trying to get them on the jobs for the summer and stuff like that. It seemed like when I went to places to encourage the employees to let these people have a chance, I just felt like it just wasn't sinking into them, and thought, well, I have to try another way. So anyway, I was going to a case program and event in Halifax, and I decided to go to council to see if I could get some money for combinations and stuff. So when I went there, I did my presentation, and then I asked after that if there's questions. And what I learned that night was that they asked me a question, but there was one lady in particular on council that she asked me direct questions, and which I was able to answer them. But and of course they funded it. But 2 days later, I was thinking about it, and the way that she made me accountable and be able to come back to them and let that on. I thought that was very important. So that's one of the reasons why I decided, because I thought that I needed to have that. I needed a seat at that table at that time. Um, I care deeply for my community. Um, Myself, I was in a motorcycle accident when I was 17. I woke up 8 months later to find out I was paralyzed from the neck down. And, we all have challenges in life. Everybody that's probably watching here today has lived in many different disabilities, and we all have to move forward. At that point, by joining, getting elected, I was not only wanted to be the shining light for my community, but also be the voice for accessibility. So, and I remember the first time I went to council, and I got out of my truck, and next thing I looked, and I had a 40-foot ramp to climb, and anyway, it was very challenging at the top. I can honestly say my shoulders were burning. So I got to the door, and of course, there was no door openers, and fought through them and decided a few minutes early. So I thought I'd go check out the bathrooms. Well, I was in there for 10 minutes just trying to get out the door because the door was so heavy and stuff. So, reality is that at that time, there needed to be change. So I remember getting to council the first night when the warden looked at me and he said, everything's good. And I said, we made her. And then in the bottom of my thoughts were, I can't show weakness. I got 4 years to make this a change. So moving on from there, I did find the biggest challenge for me was I knew I could look after the needs of my community, but the challenge was I didn't think it would be so challenging to be going to different places and different events and find out the things that I had to adapt to or try to figure out how that I could make it to these meetings in the time period I need to. Had to do a lot of pre-planning if I was going out to the city, just parking and all that stuff. It was something that I was not used to, and but it didn't take long to figure it out. At the same time, I look at the fact that as a person with a disability, I've dealt with a lot of people and know a lot of people, and I always tell people, you see my chair, that doesn't mean that I'm not a person that can do stuff and be able to be in a conversation. And we're all strong. We all have ideas. We all have dreams. We're just like everybody else. But together, moving forward with all the great stuff that's coming in through the accessibility network, and try to make our province barrier free by 2030. We have some guidelines now to go through, which we didn't have before. One of my biggest things that once I got in council, we had joint council. So I decided on my first meeting to put all the councillors in a wheelchair per day, and also our CEOs, our MLAs, university people, and the chief from our local community. And by doing that day, I give them 3 challenges. And at the end of the day, when we get back to our office and we're all sitting around, the looks on their faces and the challenges they had, and a few blisters on hands and whatever, and just the fact that they couldn't accomplish these 3 tasks as I asked, it gives them a better focus of when we spoke about accessibility on both municipalities when we joined together as joint council. They had awareness. I bring awareness to them. So moving forward, that now that we are starting to have a better lens of accessibility, we're able to approach things in a lot different ways. We want people that have disabilities to be able to share every other spot that we have in our county. I'm proud to say today the ramp is no longer there. It's been relocated, and now it's a straight run, doors repaired and power doors and all that little stuff that was a barrier first are starting to come down. And the biggest thing for me, I think moving forward is that, we need more people at the table of all disabilities. It's so important. But at the end of the day, you know, I always say, when we start bringing barriers down, we start building bridges. And so for me, I would just take the opportunity to encourage slash challenge any people that's out there if they would like to join a municipality, the province, or the feds to take your voice and advocate for such a great cause to make people with disabilities not only be part of society, but make their lives a lot easier for mobility issues and make them feel like they're welcome. There's been a stigma for many years, and so that's my thoughts on this. And I would like to thank the Nova Scotia Human Rights for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you very much, Gary. Next, we have Kevin. And I'm going to start the timer.
And thanks, Stephanie and Carla and Gary. Look, I don't know about anybody else, but the fire in my belly to think about putting my name on the ballot again hit me over the head with a board. But it's really inspiring conversation. Thanks everyone for sharing. And look, I'll get right to it. The 10 minutes will go fast, but I was a person who acquired my disability at age 14 in rural Nova Scotia, and had to face the challenge of going to an older school that wasn't accessible. And I quickly had to learn how to self-advocate for the things that I needed to be able to get back into school. So ramp at the door, washroom I could use, access to the second floor of my school, those things. And I learned that, it was hard for me to understand that I was the first student with a mobility disability to go to the school in the 40 odd years that it had existed. But it sure seemed like I was the first one to speak up and say, hey, I'm not going in the back door of my school through the storeroom, and I need to have a washroom that I could use. And I'd really like to be able to go to class on the second floor with my classmates. And I learned that by speaking up, like Stephanie had mentioned, there were good people in the bureaucratic positions in those decision and policy making decisions. And speaking up matters, finding your voice matters. And that pattern continued on as I went to St. Mary's in Halifax, moving from rural Nova Scotia to the big city as a student who uses a wheelchair. And I found out that, wow, here it's all deja vu, and I'm starting from scratch again about needing a residence room that had a washroom I could function in, being able to get from one building to another with a ramp at the door, and as Gary mentioned, a door operator. And again, speaking up and saying, hey, if you want my money, my tuition fee here, these are some of the things that I need. And it was at St. Mary's that I realized I wasn't the only person with a disability in this student body of several thousand students there. There was people there not only with mobility disabilities, but all manner of disabilities. And the things that I needed, other people needed and benefited from as well. And it kind of gave me a little taste of not only building my personal skills of becoming a self-advocate for the things I need, but realizing that if you bring these things to people's attention, then things can happen. You can influence policy and decision making, and that kind of intrigued me. Much like Stephanie, I never grew up pining to be a politician or an MLA or the prime minister or whatever. But I was involved in the community. My upbringing was to get involved, to give back through service clubs and charitable organizations, sports and recreation and those kinds of things. And it it created opportunities for me to get involved and to be seen. Like Carla, I graduated from St. Mary's and kind of full of energy and ideas. And I thought, well, I'm going to put my name on the Halifax County Council ballot to run for municipal council the year before HRM amalgamation in 1994. And it was a sports issue to do with our local sport and recreation facility that I wanted to bring about some change. And I put my name on the ballot and really didn't know much, if anything, about how to run a campaign or to actually get yourself elected. And I was unsuccessful, but it gave me a little taste of, hey, um, I learned a lot. Perhaps if I ever find an opportunity to do this again, maybe I'll revisit that. So a few years went by, and I was involved with a range of disability nonprofit organizations, both as a volunteer and as a staff member. I had the good fortune to work with Stephanie at the Canadian Paraplegic Association way back in the day, building a peer program. And one day my phone rang, and it was the Liberal Party in Nova Scotia. And it was a new MLA named Stephen McNeil who said, Kevin, I have a constituent with a disability issue. Can you give me some advice about how to tackle this or point me in the right direction? And that relationship grew, and it grew into the Liberal Party calling a few times a year in Nova Scotia to say, hey, can you give us some information on this particular disability issue? And I continued to be involved in my through my work and volunteer activities. And over the course of about 6 years, all three political parties in Nova Scotia provincially, over the course of 3 elections, asked me to consider being a candidate to represent my community. And I was always too busy. It was never the right time. And finally, in 2012, when the then leader of the Liberal Party, Stephen McNeil, called and said, "Would you consider putting your name on the ballot for the next election?" I said to myself, you know, sooner or later they're going to stop asking, and I better take the opportunity. And I did it because if I didn't take advantage of that offer to consider putting my name on the ballot, maybe I never will have that chance again. And I don't want to look back and say, what if? What if? And I always think it's better to try. And even if you fail, you can still learn, and you can still help move things along. So lo and behold, I got elected in 2013, and I had the good fortune to be elected by my peers to take on the role of Speaker of the House, and won another election in 2017. And it was important for me to be elected as Kevin Murphy first, not to be elected as the guy in the wheelchair who, may be a little bit of a unique anomaly or whatever. So I made sure that I had a good knowledge of the broad range of topics that is the expectation of any candidate. In the back of my mind, I certainly had the desire to see myself reflected in the government that was elected to serve me. At the time, there was nobody in government that had a visible disability. And I had always thought, since I acquired my disability and started to self-advocate, that boy, only if there was a real live person with a disability on the other side of the desk would they really understand what it is that I'm asking for in terms of, the need for that ramp, the need for that accessible washroom, etc. So that was always a guiding principle for me. And when the chance came to put my name on the ballot, the right time at the right place, etc., I said, I'm going to do it. And like everyone has mentioned before, politics is an interesting world, and when people have the courage to put their names on the ballot from all different walks of life, um, teams get built, and it's not something that you can do on your own. That's for sure. So you have to have good skills to be able to attract people to support what it is that you're trying to achieve as a candidate. And I didn't want to be kind of known as the disability candidate, so not a single issue candidate. But like I said, one of my main motivations was to make some systemic change within the system here in Nova Scotia. And that ranged from everything, like Carla had said,
2 minutes.
me just being around the caucus table and understanding that, okay, for us to go to events as a caucus, we have to consider Kevin's needs with the wheelchair. So the venue has to be barrier free. We have to be able to listen and hear to that first voice that Kevin brings from the disability community to our decision making. And that's so important. And some of the challenges that I faced, like Stephanie, door knocking from
You
a
have about a minute and a
wheelchair
half, Kevin, okay?
in rural Nova Scotia, is not an easy thing to do, where houses are far apart. So we had to figure that out. We overcame that with putting a team together. And I took a slightly different approach than Stephanie. Again, there's no right or wrong, but it was important from my perspective to gain those votes to be seen on the doorstep. So I did that with a team of people. I had to make sure that events that we went to were accessible. Nothing worse than signing up for a public event or a debate and to get there only to find out you can't get in the building because of some kind of physical barrier. Being able to speak in public very confidently, communicate so that people see me first and not the wheelchair first. There's just so many things that we'll touch on in the Q&A session, but to lead by example, to show your fellow elected members what's possible with a little bit of accommodation and maybe an adapted way of doing things, and to really reinforce that by having some kind of disability accommodation in place doesn't mean that I'm any less capable of making any decisions or contributing to the policy making process than anyone else. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. And thanks again to the organizers and to everybody that's tuning in today. So back to you, Anne.
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up questions, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So if people have questions that they want to ask, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to a few of them before we end in about half an hour. But one of the oh, sorry, that's my thingy going off there. Right. So one of the things I found really interesting with almost all of you was how it was those individual connections that you had with people that kind of encouraged you to run. So I guess I'm wanting to know, how would you encourage people to get involved today? What do you think would be the best sort of entry point, if you will? You know, Carly, you mentioned that, you know, you ran for the school board first, and Kevin, you ran, you know, municipally first, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think is a good way for people to sort of enter into this realm? And Kevin's got his hand up first, so we'll go with him. And then if any of you want to also answer, just put your hand up and I'll get to you. Okay, Kevin, go.
Thanks. Excellent question. And I think, first of all, there is no right or wrong way to do this. You know, if you ask 10 people who had their name on the ballot, I'm sure you're going to get 10 different answers. But I think, you know, for me, I just want to reinforce that by getting involved um, in your community, in the things that you're passionate about. So whether that's your community kind of locally by the geographic definition, or in your community, the disability wise, demographic wise, like get involved with an organization, find a cause that's personal to you, that you have a passion for, that you can lend your voice and your expertise to. And like Carla and Stephanie have reinforced, and Gary, people notice that. So, you know, you can't just sit home and say, well, I want to get involved, or I want to be an MLA or an MP, and wait for your phone to ring. You have to get involved and kind of make it happen, and things will happen.
Carla, thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Really important question. Like everybody else, I think there's 100 different ways to get involved, and you got to find your way. But I also think it's reaching out to leaders that you might know, and you know, whether it's someone like Steph or myself or Kevin or Gary, and kind of talk to them about their lived experience in this job. And I know for us, I take it very seriously to kind of actively recruit potential candidates with disabilities. I don't think a lot of people see themselves as the right person for this job because they've never seen someone like themselves do this job. So even if there's an amazing talents and skills and experience and expertise to offer, and you would be a perfect person for this job, you don't see yourself in that way because nobody like you has done it in your mind. So I kind of think we really have to, as kind of leaders, go out and actively recruit, unapologetically, quite frankly. I think we have to work within the established party system to challenge political parties to actively recruit candidates with disabilities to make their systems more disability inclusive. And I think that, you know, getting involved in your local youth council if you're young, whether it's mayor's youth council or an MP youth council, get to know kind of the political system within your own community. And it just take the leap, right? Like say yes. Like that feels like the biggest piece of advice I could give. When somebody asks, like Steph was asked and Kevin was asked, I mean, I was asked by Justin Trudeau, I said no 3 times before I said yes. And I thank God I said yes eventually. But say yes, and we will help you. We will all be there for you as your community.
Great answer. Anybody else want an answer? Or
I
Gary,
will.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, you guys didn't leave me much. But at the same time, I think for myself, you know, for years of working with people and people that help with accessibility in many roles, just the knowledge of knowing them and talking to them, you know, just to put that comment in the ear that you would make a great candidate and stuff like that, and encouraging people moving forward with disabilities to be a part of the voice, I guess. That would be my comment on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Another question. I guess you kind of alluded to it a bit, Carla, was, you know, I guess there is a bit of an onus on the part, if you will, of candidates who have run to encourage other people with disabilities. But in a lot of your instances, you were also approached by the leaders of parties to run, but how do you get political parties to make themselves, uh, for lack of a better word, I guess, disability friendly, so that people, I guess I just wonder at times, will people not do it because am I gonna have to do this again and again and again, to advocate for my needs? And I guess associated with that is, um, have you seen um any changes to the way things are accessible since you first ran and when you either left politics or if you're still in politics? Have you seen that change over time? That was a
Yeah,
very long-winded question, sorry.
I'll start.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, it has changed, and it is changing. It's slow, and it's kind of two steps forward, one step sideways, but it is changing. Um, the the same thing I would say um, in any circumstance applies here. Don't assume people know you're interested. Don't assume people don't want you there. And don't assume they know what you need. A lot of people, and I think this is true of like the parties, the systems, um, it's not that they don't want to be accessible or inclusive. They just don't know what they don't know. And and yeah, we have to tell them a lot of times to drill it in, but that's because each time there's somebody new in the chair, right? Show up. When people with disabilities start showing up at political events for a party, the party will have to start making notice, right? When people start raising their hand and saying, I'm I'm coming to this event, but I will need this. Um, you know, they'll realize they need to put it in place. It's really important, but it's really hard, I would say, for those organizations, in fairness, for them to try and anticipate everything and then have nobody show up and nobody tell them they did the right thing or the wrong thing. They need to learn through experience, and that happens when people show up. So people with disabilities need to show up. Um, and if it's a person with a disability who wants to run, if you're not showing up, then you don't then you're not going to make it, right? You
Right.
have to show up.
Right. Thank you. Kevin?
I think that's a super important point, Stephanie, that uh, disability matters. And in Canada, those of us that are um, either have our own personal lived experience, um, we know what the issues are, but we cannot assume that government knows what those issues are and what the potential solutions are. Um, we do need to show up because votes matter. Uh, Votes matter, and that's how uh, parties come to power to be able to make policy and make decisions on your behalf. So if you go to a party organized event, whatever party fits your political leanings and your moral compass, etc., um, the your presence there um, makes a difference. And parties need to understand, and I've been beating this drum for 30 plus years, the numbers involved, the sheer numbers, 27% of Canadians, 8 million Canadians. I'm one vote, but I have a family, excuse me. And if there's a party with good disability policy, pretty sure they're going to get all the votes in my family. So disability affects everyone. We all know that. Nova Scotia has the highest per capita rate of disability in North America. So any political party that shows good disability policy an aggressive disability policy is going to get the support of that demographic, and that's powerful stuff for the power brokers in politics.
Thank you, Kevin. Carla?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say what Kevin said. I think that, we saw it in 2020 in the US with Joe Biden, and there was an active kind of disability lobby and a disability effort to be made. The political party, federally, I'm talking the political party in Canada that realizes that this is a voting bloc could be in power forever, right? Like if you actively courted the disability vote in this country the way it should be courted, if you think of the numbers, Kevin's, 28% of one person loves that person, you're talking over 50% of the population with an active interest in these issues. No political party has realized that yet. Like no political party has actively courted they've played with it a little bit. And partially because of the people who are on the table, but honestly, like parties court the Canadian Italian vote, which is 0.0003% of the population. Very important. For those of you that Italian think it's an important vote. But I can tell you, like 28% of the population is a voting block. If you put something in the window, like Kevin said, by way of disability policy or disability programming. And no political party has figured that out yet. It boggles the mind, but it's, not yet.
Yep. We have a really interesting, do either, Gary, do you want to answer that, or should I go to the next question?
No, thank you. No, I totally agree with everything you said. I know myself in the last 9 years, I've been approached a couple times regards to moving to provincial, mostly provincial. But yeah, I think that, in our current, whatever we do as far as for moving forward, I think it's important for, us as elected officials, in my case, that I show the people that there are needs, especially I'm in a rural community as well, very small community, and just the reaction of people that when I go to an event, so many people come over and they do have to take that chance because they can ask me these questions and feel very comfortable around me. And so therefore I feel like, I'm just my knowledge of my everyday life experiences interacts with the public, and therefore, when we hear the numbers of how many people have disabilities in Nova Scotia and it's climbing because we have a senior area here, and our numbers will probably go as high as 35 probably by 2030. So it is concerning, but at the same time we're moving in the right direction. Like to see it go a lot faster, but if we can be part of the stepping stones to get there, I'm very good with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question for you folks. First, I wish there was a way for you all to hear me applauding. I am very moved by each of your stories. I am the parent of a child with significant developmental delays, so I'm literally his voice and always his advocate. I'm also now work within disability supports. I periodically think about political involvement, but my biggest fear is that this sort of public service will deplete my emotional reserves more than they already are, and this will impact my caregiving at home. All this to say, do you have any advice regarding keeping your emotional, psychological tank full? Is there enough in the work that is rewarding to keep yourself, quote unquote, up? Excellent question. Who would like to start with that one?
I'll go.
Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
First off, politics isn't for everyone. There's an ugly side to politics, and you do have to have a thick skin. So to have that thick skin and make sure you still feel like it's worth it, you do have to keep grounded. You have to have a supportive family and friend network around you. You have to make sure you check in with them and say, am I a good person? Like, am I doing the right things? Am I okay? And because sometimes you need that reassurance because it can be exhausting, and you can start to bear the negativity that sometimes comes with politics. But if you're certain about who matters in your life, who who is going to be there when you're not elected, that matters. So I would say, yes, there is enough in the work that's worth it. When you have the ability and the opportunity to impact on policy that affects people's lives, it fills you back up. And it won't be every day. But if you get elected, you have that opportunity and you will help people. And when you can do that and you can feel it, it's totally worth it.
A great answer. Carla.
Yeah, ditto. Honestly, yes, it's absolutely worth it. And yes, it's really, really hard. And you do have to kind of lean on your people, right? And your people, your family, your friends, your networks, your fellow advocates. Stephanie and I have been, comrades in arms in this fight for 2 or 3 decades. And every little thing, every time a parent comes up to me and says, because of something you did, my kid's life is a little better, right? Or a silly example, I was back in Ottawa for my last trip last week, and I went to the Parliamentary restaurant, and the person who's in charge of the restaurant came up to me and gave me a large print version of the menu. And he said, I just want you to know that we keep a large print version of the menu now here because, we've given it out to so many people. And it feels such a silly example. And it's not the biggest thing we had to tackle in the world, but it was just this little moment of, you know what, there's somebody else who's visually impaired who's going to come and eat here. It's going to be, and they're going to be able to choose what they eat because of maybe I ate there the first time and gave them heck for not having a large print version or something. But honestly, you get to make laws and you get to make policy and you get to change the world. And then you have to get back up again when someone knocks you down, and you have to have a ton of confidence that what you're doing is worth it. But it's totally worth it. Like it's really hard, and it's because hard things are hard. But it's really worth it. There's a long game in politics that you have to play. The change, like Steph said, 2 steps forward, 1 step really over to the side. You have to be willing to wait it out and just be stubborn about the change you want and be confident that it's worth it. But it's totally worth it. Like, it is absolutely worth it. And it's exhausting and it's hard and it's awesome.
Thanks. Kevin?
I just want to echo both of those sets of comments, that you just cannot be discouraged. Anything worth doing is worth the time and energy. When you consider what's at hand, that you have the opportunity to bring your personal expertise and your lived experience to shape a policy or influence a decision that everyone else who shares the same set of circumstances that you do is going to benefit from, because you put yourself out there, is a really powerful thing. And like Carla's example of, and Stephanie's and Gary's, changes to town hall, changes to the BC legislature, changes to the parliament buildings, changes to the legislature in Halifax, which is the oldest parliament building in the Commonwealth outside of Westminster in London. There's a ramp to the speaker's dais now, which is part of the almost 260-year history of that building, so that any person now with a mobility issue can see themselves with that speaker's role. And that's super, super important. That's not to say somebody else wouldn't have done it at some point in time, but by putting yourself out there, taking the chance, being persistent, not taking no for an answer, now the door is open for other people to do the same thing. So the legacy you can leave, even the small things, make a difference going forward. So
We have a question from an individual who's deaf. So Betty, do you want to go ahead?
And I don't think Betty has the video access at the moment. I can try
Okay,
that. I have Vicky added here who has requested to give her question verbally. Just going to ask Vicky
okay,
to unmute her mic and she can ask her question, and then I'll try and
okay,
bring up Betty's video.
okay.
Okay. My question is twofold. It's really quick, both kind of important. First of all, I have wanted to be Prime Minister since I was 8, so thank you for taking this. My question is, I tried to run for politics. What I found the most difficult when I tried to run municipally was lots of people were willing to be door knockers, etc. When I said I was going to run, or thinking about running, but nobody wanted to join my campaign team. So really, it would have just been me. So obviously, I can do it because you can't run a campaign by yourself, whether you have a disability or not. So my question is, first one is, how do you put together a campaign team? Like, should I start now, even though the election's gonna be in like 4 years, or like, what do I do there? Also, how do you keep from being the disability candidate? Because I've always been known as that girl in the wheelchair, and that is not why I want to get elected. I mean, it partially is because there aren't enough women in politics, and there certainly aren't enough disabled women. In fact, at least provincially, I've never seen a disabled woman of any type in politics. But how do you keep from being the token disabled person, and how do you put together a team?
Kevin.
thanks for the question, Vicky. And look, congratulations on all your accomplishments to date. And I think, look, you're on the right track. I would just say keep doing what you're doing. Continue to be involved and to be visible. And in terms of building a team, you can never start too early. So if your target is the next municipal election here in Halifax or the next provincial election, make it known that you want to be a candidate. And as Stephanie mentioned, organic things will happen. People will come to you and say, hey, I like what you're doing. I want to be part of your team. And look, when you're starting with a brand new idea from ground zero, when that first person comes, you've grown your team by 100%. And then when that next person comes, you've added to it. So from that perspective, it really is one person at a time. And then, you build on that, you learn from them, you have honest conversations with them, and, you seek out others that have gone before you and get some advice, and people will come out to support you. I'm confident in that.
Anybody else?
Oh,
Gary?
yeah, no, thank you, Steph, for the question. Personally, for me, I got involved with a lot of stuff in the community just to get out there and let people see who you are and see your abilities to be able to talk to people and tell them some of your concerns and stuff like that. Little pillars that way that will not only this year and a number of years that you'll before you do it, and find out, there's always leaders in each community and get to know them and get their thoughts and stuff, and just kind of build that support around yourself, and when you take the opportunity to put your name on a ballot, when people see that your name, they recognize who you are, and they don't look at your mobility. They know you as the person that's on the ballot.
Thanks very much, Gary. Jeff, did we have any luck with Betty?
Yeah, Betty's on the screen there now, Anne, so she can go ahead with her question.
Hi. Yes, I just wanted to thank you all so much for being involved. Thank you, Kevin, Carla, Gary, Stephanie. Thank you so much for being involved in politics and being willing to talk about your experience. So I am deaf and I grew up deaf. And I've been doing a lot of advocacy for the community in regards to accessibility, because accessibility is incredibly important for the entire deaf community and for all of us. But accessibility depends on politicians.
All political groups.
It's important for all political groups to be involved in accessibility. And I do feel like we have some progress, and then sometimes we fall off the track and we're not having as much progression. And so what's really important is everyone in the deaf-blind community, the blind community, the hard of hearing community continues to advocate. And I'm just wondering how we can continue to support one another in this endeavor.
Thanks, Betty.
We want to
Oh,
be
sorry.
a part of your team, and we want to help you along with your advocacy. I know a lot of us are tired. It's been 25, 30 years of the same story. And so sometimes it can feel like you're plateauing.
Stephen McNeil improved.
So Stephen McNeil did improve a lot of areas in regards to accessibility and has made a lot of positive changes. But I feel like I don't see a lot of interpreters on TV anymore, or there's a lot of times where we progress and then regress, progress and then regress. And your answer and insights will be a great help to me. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Betty. Carla.
Well, thank you for that question, Betty. Listen, totally with you. I think it is, again, it's a long game, right? And I think we need to lean on each other as a community of disability advocates and persons with disabilities, because there's a lot of power and strength in knowing that you're not the only one in the fight, is the only way to say it, right? Is that, you might be the only one at a particular table. You are backed up by an army, right, of hardworking, caring people who will have your back. And it is really important that we always take a multi-disability perspective. Certainly, I don't have the lived experience of other disability. I don't have the lived experience of other blind people for the most part. But there's a commonality in our purpose and the things that we care about and the things that we want to see happen for other people like us. And I think just leaning in on the community and just the numbers Kevin talked about, that goes both ways. It should mean that political parties pay more attention, but it also means that there's a lot of us out there. And it feels sometimes like we've been doing this for a long time, but in the kind of over the course of history, we've made some big changes pretty darn quickly. And I'll, Anne and I can talk for hours about the changes Steve made in the world in his lifetime. You can't even imagine. And I think we'll all look back over our lifetimes and feel the same way. As you're living it in the moment, it feels like it's taking forever. But I guess just knowing that you're not alone in this should bring you some comfort, and that we are all kind of rowing the same boat in the same direction.
Thank you. I have a technical question to ask to ask Jeff. Do we have to stop right at 4:30, or do we have time to do closing remarks?
I would say closing round of comments from folks and wrap it up. Obviously, this could go on. A second session would be great.
Yes. So I first want to say one thing that I was really taken with was when Kevin said, listening to all these people talk again makes me think about running again. And I was astonished after Steve ran that time, and even when he was sick, and even when he wasn't There was just, no way that I at least felt that he could ever run again. He was still talking to people about wanting to run again. Like it was really something to see. He just loved it. He loved being out there. He loved meeting people, and he would be thrilled to have seen this panel today. It has really been phenomenal to see us pick up this topic again, and I just want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy week to share with us at this time. So I'm going to give each of you just a few minutes just for a quick closing comment. Very
If I
quick.
if I could go very quickly because I actually have to
Yeah,
run.
go,
I
go,
have another
go.
meeting.
No problem.
Thank you for including me, folks on the call and folks who asked questions. And if you didn't get your questions answered, I'm sure we can find a way to answer them after the call.
Yes.
This is not an end of the discussion. So
No.
thank you. And if it's something you're considering, keep asking the questions and get involved. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to bug off.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Carla?
Sure. Listen, I guess for me, this is what democracy looks like, right? Like democracy is precious, and Canada, and our democracy didn't happen by accident. It happened because good people dreamed really big, and because we cherish democracy. And a key kind of cornerstone of democracy is representation, right? Like our elected officials, that it has to look like us, right? Like Canada's parliament has to look like us. Our legislatures has to look like us. And that means that, upwards of 25% of us should, identify or should have some kind of disability if that was going to bear out. And I think these conversations, give me hope that we are headed in the right direction. I know we are. I don't even have to have that hope. It's apparent to me that this is a genie you can't put back in the bottle, and that we are going to continue to, move this agenda forward. Political engagement is so important. Political activism is so important. And the voices of people with disability in this country deserve to be heard, need to be heard. Otherwise, we will not succeed as a country. I mean, that's how important this is. So thank you. And Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Gary.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the invite. There's a lot of great discussion. I believe that moving forward, we all have our hopes and wishes, I guess. But in my situation here in the county and Cadieux is that when we first started, there was so many obstacles and barriers, and today it's just so much better. So, our community does it. I see a lot more places where I go now that, like Kevin mentioned before, the door openers and whatever, it's starting to be a custom. And so it's nice to see our problems that we're going in the right direction. And, we all lead by example over probably our careers and whatever. And, but the most important part I figure is that we're getting the government involved, and we're the voice to get things moving. So for that, I thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kevin, you have the last word.
Thanks very much to everyone for participating today. Thanks to Carla and Gary and Stephanie. Thanks to you, Anne, for hosting. Thanks to Jeff and the team at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission and everybody involved with keeping disability on the topic of discussion. This is a really important event today, and everybody can be proud of their participation, because our goal in bringing this up in concert with the theme of Accessibility Week this year is so appropriate. It's never been more important than it is today to have our voices heard. So this panel, this discussion represents another small step in getting people involved in trying to inspire other conversations, other thoughts, other decisions on your part. None of us are hard to find on Google. If anybody has questions, they can reach out afterwards. Nothing would thrill me more than to have a personal conversation with anybody who's thinking about putting their name on a ballot. And we really hope that this represents the start of a chain of events that we can see in those next elections in Canada, in your areas of all three levels of government, that we see more and more people with disabilities to put their name on a ballot. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Kevin. And one last technical question for Jeff again. Will we be able to keep the questions so that we can respond to them?
Yeah, we'll download those in
Okay,
the
perfect.
report.
Okay, perfect. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Bye for now.